Big round of applause all the way from Queensland. Daniel Fletcher, ladies and gentlemen.
Some moments will change your life, and some questions will haunt you forever. And there are some things in this world that just do not make sense. Like how tennis is scored. The name Siobhan. Why it's called cargo if it goes on ships and not ship go. Why we have two names for animals, one when they're alive and one when they're on your plate. Cattle become beef or steak, pigs become pork or bacon or ham, but chickens, they stay chicken. And never fear, hot dogs are not made of dogs. But regardless of these mysteries, I want to tell you about a moment that changed my life, and I want to ask you a question, and I hope that this question haunts you forever, like a rock in your shoe. Every time you get a rock in your shoe from now on, I hope you think of me, and I hope you think of this question. This is one of my children, Jack. He's on the right. And in local government, we often think we can do things that we don't have the powers to do. Jack made that error one day. I haven't told Annabelle that I put this up, so please don't share that with her. I want to go through... Clearly I missed the middle part there on that slide, but anyway. I want to go through three things today. I'm going to make some bets with you, and then I'm going to change the way that we frame some things up about our sector. I'm going to explain why it's so important, and then going to talk about some of the potential solutions. The story begins on the 11th of February in 2018 in Japan, in Ichinoseki. I was very privileged to be part of a local government delegation to a sister city exchange, and on this morning it was -1 degrees. Clearly I've messed up in this PowerPoint somehow, but here are the photos that you can see of us doing all of the things that you would expect a local government delegation to do. Eat the cuisine, meet with the locals, take photos, pretend like we're learning things. And as you can imagine, we're having the small talk conversations, and this question was asked of me. What is your job? Now, if you thought that you came to the room where you didn't have to engage and you were just going to get through this last little period after the afternoon tea break, you're in the wrong room. So I want you to put yourself overseas. You're in a country that doesn't necessarily speak English as the first language, and the crew you're with, someone turns to you and says, "What is your job?" Turn to the person next to you within the next 10 seconds. Don't overcook this. Just answer the question. What would you say if someone said, "What is your job?" Go. All right, 10 seconds, 10 seconds. Bring it back, bring it back. should be a simple activity. This is Mimi. She was one of the translators that was a part of our crew and mostly spent time helping me have conversations with many of the locals. And when Mimi asked me this question, my response was, well, I'm an executive with the local council back in Australia. Seems like a pretty standard response. Most of the time when we are asked a question about our job, our brain takes us to a place of what it is that we do without understanding some particularly important things. And I want to start with an Alice in Wonderland quote. Alice is going through the woods and runs into the Cheshire Cat. Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here? The cat says, that depends a good deal on where you want to go. Alice says, I don't much care. Where? The cat, then it doesn't much matter which way to go. Who answered the question with what you do? One person. If you've heard this talk before, then you can just leave the room. But Jonathan, what did you answer? Herding cats. Herding cats. Probably a good reflection of the sector. Especially our elected members who are on this trip as well, their response was, oh, I'm a councillor. I'm the mayor of the council. And it's a very simplistic way of thinking about what it is that we do. If you shift your mind to thinking, rather than my job being what I do, if you think of the job as the goal you pursue, it's a more expansive definition, not only of your role, but of the sector that we work within. And so I was armed with this information at the time, and I reframed my response and said, well, what I do is I build thriving and sustainable communities. Sounds neat, sounds clever, and it directly represents the goal that we pursue. Other examples outside of our sector might be when you jump into an Uber. Again, one of those innocuous conversations unfolds. And the Uber driver could tell you that I'm an Uber driver. That's what he does, or she. But the goal that they pursue is getting people to where they want to go. Hold that thought. And if I take us out and put us into an AFL arena, because we're in WA, but it can apply to any team sport. What is the goal of AFL? Success? Yep. To win. Not a trick question. To win. How do you win? Kick more goals than the other. If you score 200 points, it doesn't matter if the opposition scored 201 points, you still lose. Bit of nostalgia I thought I'd share with you. So if we ask ourselves, with the framing we've now got, what is the job of every member of an AFL team? Yep, it's an expansive definition. What was that? Play the opposition. Play their position. Interesting. We've often heard conversations about we're all role players, we have roles to play. That is true. But if every player played their role, you might not have a very unified team. You're all thinking, that's strange. The job of every player in any team is to help the team win. You can do that in a variety of different ways. And if I consider two great organisations, Local Government Professionals WA, their vision, local government professionals leading and thriving in an industry that is continually improving its service to local communities. So every one of the LG Pro WA team members, this is their job. There'll be subordinate tasks that need to unfold to achieve that, and we want to do this ethically, sustainably, in an efficient way. And similarly, with my council being a diverse region at the forefront of a changing world, it gives us guidance around stepping away from what we do and the goal that we pursue to understand the bigger picture. Just need to refer back to my notes to explain to you. In Ichinoseki, they have a water festival every year. The Daito Ohara Misukaki Festival, which has been celebrated since 1657, following the Great Fire in Edo. It involves men in their unlucky years running naked or in a giant mare nappy through the streets where the community throw water on them. The picture on the bottom right, on the far right, is former Mayor of Central Highlands, Kerry Hayes. The other gentleman in the costume is the Ichinoseki Mayor, and the other gentleman in the mare nappy with me is the Deputy Mayor. Now, before this photo was taken, the Deputy Mayor asked our Mayor if he would like to participate in the festival. And appropriately, our Mayor turned to the Ichinoseki Mayor and said, well, what do you think? And the Ichinoseki Mayor said back to our Mayor, no. And so the Deputy Mayor said, well, would anybody like to participate? And fortunately, I had a copy of my position description handy, and I checked it, and it did not say that I was required to run through the streets in a giant man nappy in Japan. That is a video, but it's not playing. It may not be a video. Doing your job may be hazardous to your career. 851 people participated in that event. 52 required hospitalisation. I didn't know that before I said yes. One thing that's a mathematical truth, and I'm glad that I'm in a room full of accountants, is that to optimise any system, you need to optimise the subsystems. It's not something that applies to local government or to a particular industry. It is just how it is. We operate in an awful system with local government, especially when the competing elements of the linear thinkers, many of you, accountants, finance professionals in this room, many of the engineers that build the roads and bridges and manage the water supply, have to operate within. Now again, if you thought you weren't engaging, you're in the wrong room. I need you to turn to the same person and you need to play a game of scissors, paper, rock. 30 seconds. Play a couple of games and see who ends up the best. Go. All right, bring it back. There is a competitive edge to you accountants, it's good. So, it might seem like a pretty simple activity, and you might be wondering why or even how it applies to our sector. But if we don't understand the importance of the game that we're playing, that it doesn't matter which one of the three you choose, someone can beat you and you can beat someone else. We live and breathe and occupy space from a local government perspective, which is entirely non-linear. When we start to layer the community element, we start to layer the professional element, we start to layer the business element, we start to layer the industry element, we start to layer the other levels of government element, then we put this political nonsense all over it. Life would be much simpler if we were just living in a linear world. And I've often had many conversations with CEOs who are in councils that have been put into administration. What a fantastic job that is. To literally make decisions based on the data and the information in front of you with no other external factors. It's no coincidence that those councils that are put into administration come out of that administratively much better, because all the policies, all the budget, everything is completely recalibrated. And then there'll be a new group of elected members, and who knows what will happen then. But that's the world that we occupy. If I am coming in to this team, a new council, a sporting team, and I'm going to explain to you that I'm this management by objectives kind of leader, considering the systems and the subsystems, and I want to pay people by performance. Now, importantly, there may be an exception to this. I'm not familiar enough with the Western Australian system, but we don't generally pay for performance in our sector. But if you were a defender, a typical defender, and someone said, "What is your job?" what would you answer? Stop the other team scoring. If you were an attacker, what would you answer? If I'm the coach and we're winning 1-0 and there's 2 minutes to go, and the direction is for all the attackers to go back and defend the goals, and you have one of your attackers say to you, nope, it's not my job. My job is to score goals. Do you want someone like that on your team? If we have implemented a situation where you will be, as a defender, paid in inverse proportion to the amount of goals that go in. So the more goals you stop, the more pay you get. Vice versa, if you're an attacker, the more goals you score, the more pay you get. That is literally the simplest system. Two systems, linear everywhere, should be a pretty good scenario, right? If you're a defender, would you rather win 5-4 or lose 0-1?
Lose 0-1.
Straight away, you've got half of the team preferring to lose. If you're an attacker, would you rather win 1-0 or lose 4-5? Again, half of the team, two of the simplest systems, and half of your team will not be following the same path. Admittedly, as I mentioned before, we're fortunate to some extent that we don't have that as a system. We operate with global incentives, where the strengths of that is you've got one team, you've got alignment, you get cooperation, and you get risk pooling, which is kind of like an insurance situation where it's based off the decreasing marginal utility framework, where essentially as humans, when the stakes are high enough, we prefer stable outcomes. But what are the weaknesses of the system that we operate within? Free riders? Have you ever had a conversation with someone and we're discussing the dead wood in the organisation? You've got complexity. Moral hazard. So if we've got, I'm not sure how many staff are at the City of Perth. Someone tell me that? Let's say there's 1,000 and one person goes fishing. Shouldn't have much of an issue, shouldn't have much of an impact. But what's the problem with that logic? It's never just one person. When you see one person going fishing, it starts to snowball. So we get adverse selection. Why would you want to work at an organisation that doesn't reward you for performance? The high-performing people end up being averaged out. So this is the system that we operate in. Consider the benefits of a local incentive system. You get individual excellence, individual focus. Apply this to your council and to your teams. You get departments and teams focused on building roads. You get accountability, favourable selection. You're going to attract people that are going to be good at their job because they're going to get rewarded for that. The weaknesses of this is there's a siloed mentality. Ever heard of that in local government? Get that myopia, just focused on your area. We're not really helping the team win. We get the sub-optimisation, which we're looking for to a certain extent, that doesn't impact the overall organisation, and then we get the risk bearing. So it's like, well, local incentives kind of suck too, and global incentives suck. So how do we operate in a system where we get the best performance? And for all of you, I knew that given the cohort of the room, some of you would be excited by the Nobel Prize winning Friedrich Hayek, who solved the calculus debate. But importantly, what he says, if we can agree that the economic problem of society is mainly one of rapid adaptation to changes in the particular circumstances of time and place, it would seem to follow that the ultimate decisions must be left to the people who are familiar with these circumstances, who know directly of the relevant changes and of the resources immediately available to meet them. We cannot expect that this problem will be solved by first communicating all this knowledge to a central board which, after integrating all knowledge, issues its orders. We must solve it by some form of decentralisation. So our system reporting to the board doesn't really work. But the other part of this is, but the man on the spot cannot decide solely on the basis of his limited but intimate knowledge of the facts of his immediate surroundings. There still remains the problem of communicating to him such further information as he needs to fit his decisions into the whole pattern of the changes of the larger economic system. Fred Kaufman studied at MIT for 10 years trying to solve this problem. And the result was they determined the outcome is that there is no solution to this problem. You may have heard, if you were here last year when I spoke, the part of this solution if it's a bear or tiger in the woods, and Adrian and I are next to each other, and I stop to change my boots and put my running gear on, and Adrian says to me, "What are you doing?" I'm saying, he says that you can't outrun this lion. I said, "I don't need to, I just need to outrun you." And as a sector, that's the best way that we can solve the issues that we have. Not worrying about some of those problems that I started off with. There are no solutions to some of those things. But some of the really important stuff which we learned in the early keynote is about reframing. And if I can ask you this question as well, how many times have you said to yourself, or have you heard one of your team, one of the staff say, "I've got to do something. I have got to write a report. I have got to do task X. I have got to go to this meeting. I have got to go and meet with Minister so-and-so." Seems pretty standard vernacular. What a privilege that we have working in our sector. I get to write a report to the elected members about an important topic that they'll make a decision on that will impact the lives of this community. I get to go to meet with Minister so-and-so to discuss this particular matter. I get to come to the LG Pro WA Finance Conference in whatever capacity you're here. When we reframe, "I've got to do something," part of the challenge to you here is, how often do you do that? How often do your staff do that? How easily is it just to change that one little bit so that we're not trying to solve problems that don't have solutions? We're actually just inspiring, motivating, and enabling the sector to do the best we can with what we have wherever we are. want to play a game with you now, really quickly. I'm going to put up one picture. You've got to shout out the opposing one. Go. I know you've got a pair. There'll be some subjectivity here, don't worry. So these things exist in our everyday lives. This decision that sometimes we make, and I mean, I know people that will only watch Sky News, will only watch ABC. It's a real threat to our ability to help the team win. You may have seen this before, but I'm not sure how to play this one. You'll have to focus.
It's easy to put people in boxes. There's us, and there's them. The high earners, and those just getting by. Those we trust, and those we try to avoid. There's the new Danes, and those who've always been here. The people from the countryside, and those who've never seen a cow. The religious, and the self-confident. There are those we share something with, and those we don't share anything with.
Velkommen. Jeg kommer til at stille jer nogle spørgsmål i dag. Nogle af dem kan godt være lidt personlige, men jeg håber, I vil svare ærligt på dem. Hvem herinde i rummet var klassens klovn? Hvem er bonusforældre?
And then suddenly, there's us. We who believe in life after death. We who've seen UFOs. And all of us who love to dance. We who've been bullied. And we who've bullied others. And then there's us, the lucky ones who've had sex this past week. We who are broken-hearted. We who are madly in love. We who feel lonely. We who are bisexual, and we who acknowledge the courage of others. We who have found the meaning of life, and we who have saved lives. And then there's all of us who just love Denmark. So maybe there's more that brings us together than we think. TV2 Denmark. All that we share.
Who's seen that before? A couple of people. Just got to acknowledge the time because I've taken up too much. It's impossible to work in local government. You're expected to innovate but not challenge tradition. Be cost efficient but ensure world-class delivery. Stay impartial but show genuine care for our community. Be accessible but not too informal. Solve big problems with tiny budgets. You're expected to be collaborative, but the moment you make a decision, someone will call it favouritism. Engage the community extensively but not spend too much time on consultation. You need to be proactive but also cautious. Heaven forbid a mistake makes the headlines. You're told your role is to serve the people, but the public often misunderstand or underappreciate what you do. You're a facilitator of democracy, yet accused of bureaucracy. You're asked to implement change, but when you do, you're either moving too fast or not fast enough. And somehow, through all of this, you're supposed to love your job. You're expected to smile when faced with hostility, to keep showing up when challenges feel overwhelming. The truth is, working in local government can be exhausting, frustrating, and thankless. But it also matters deeply, because every pothole filled, park maintained, policy implemented, and person helped is a reminder that the work we do shapes lives and strengthens communities. So no, it's not easy to work in local government, but it's important and it's worth it. Don't forget to wake up, don't forget to pay attention, don't forget to keep dreaming, and don't forget your job is to help the team win. Thank you.